As I said to Luke and I saw him, I said, "What? No thunderstorm?" Because remember, my wife was there a few months ago when we lost power for a while. That dog is cute. What's the breed?
Jack Russell Terrier.
Oh,
She's 7 weeks old.
the Jack Russell Terrorist, as they're called.
Females, yes.
Yes. Yes.
The females
They're
are
wonderful, dogs. I have a couple of them. Okay. Beautiful, beautiful dogs. Talking about one of my favorite topics, I like to bust mythology. We're going to bust mythology. So remember Jack Nicholson in that movie? You can't handle the truth. I hope you can handle the truth, because I'm going to give you the truth tonight. Because there's been a ton of mythology about particularly First National flags and some other flags as well. And I can document all this. I've been doing this for almost 40 years. I've crawled all over the National Archives, state archives, all over the place trying to track all this kind of stuff down to primary source documents. And I think I've pretty much got it nailed. New things keep coming up. In fact, I just got an email this week from a friend of mine. Let's pull it up real quick. 3 First National flags have turned up, new ones I didn't know about, have turned up in the last 2 months.
Wow.
3. So, yeah. This one, I don't know, I'm sorry, you won't be able to see it very well.
No.
It's a 15-star flag, which are pretty rare. It ties in with John McLean's Partisan Rangers of Virginia. So the only 2 Partisan Rangers units raised in Virginia were John Mosby's 43rd and McLean's, and McNeil's. He was in Missouri when the war began, and was a member of the Missouri State Guard, and was captured at the Battle of Carthage. And that flag is still in the family. And he was a West Virginia native, but as so many Americans would do before the war, go west, young man, young lady, to farm, and he became an incredibly successful farmer and cattle raiser in Missouri. But then when the war breaks out, he goes back to, after he gets captured and escapes, he goes back to fight Virginia. So that's the 3rd flag in 2 months. You'll see maybe the other 2 I think are in this program. So they're still coming up. So if you have an attic and a big trunk in it, go open that trunk up. There may be a surprise in there. If there is, let Lee know, and Lee can let me know. Next one, please. So the Confederates in 1861 will use a variety of flags. In fact, the Army of Tennessee that defends your state, Alabama, Georgia, the main Army of Tennessee will use up until 1864 9 patterns and sub-patterns of battle flags, because Braxton Bragg didn't care about flags. His corps commanders did, but he as an Army commander never did. So you can see distinctive flags here. The first Texas flag, they'll lose that color at Miller's Cornfield at Antietam. Stonewall Jackson with the A&B Silk, and then Sidney Johnson and Shiloh rallying, and then the 8th Arkansas with their tapping their bayonets with his little coffee cup that he had there. Next one, please. So these will get company flags. All of these flags will represent not only the southern states, but the men that will show up to fight under them. The military of today is homogenous. They will take people from all over the country and shove you into a unit, and you fight as an American soldier, sailor, airman, marine. Back then, you fought as a company from Athens, Alabama, who got sent to an Alabama regiment with a number of other companies raised in Alabama, and would form, after with 10 companies together and a commander, would form a regiment of infantry. Who was the main company from here, Lee?
From this area?
Yeah, from the,
9th Alabama.
Well, I mean, a company?
Oh, the company was Hobbs and McClellan.
Okay.
Companies in the 9th.
Okay, and they were from here. Okay, so they possibly were given a flag before they left, because that flag.
That's what I wanted to talk to you about.
Oh, okay.
All back was trying to find out what our company's flag would be.
What it look like? Okay, I'll have to do some.
Moving on.
Okay, shoot me an email about that. I'll be home Monday. So this is, oh, it works.
It should.
Okay, and that's forward. I guess the arrow.
Yeah,
Okay.
the left and right arrow.
All right, fantastic. This is a picture of the Sumter Guards of the Fort Georgia. Now that is a drawn-in flag. There is a picture of them with their actual company flag. I only know of maybe 3 or 4 actual images taken of a Confederate company with their company colors displayed. You'll see another one in the program tonight. Here's Joe Johnston with Bartow's George Brigade, allegedly carrying Georgia state flags. We'll talk about that. That's the Citadel Cadets firing on the Star of the West in January 1861. As Lincoln's trying to well, actually not Lincoln, Buchanan is trying to reinforce the garrison at Fort Sumter, and their palmetto flag there. So we start with the Secession era, which officially begins in November, but you see hints of things like that coming even prior to November. This is an actual Secession banner. There's a drawing of it from sheet music, and I'll talk about sheet music. This banner is in the South Carolina State Museum, and you see broken stones of the rest of the states of the United States, and then 15 stones with the coats of arms and the names of all the slave states of the Confederacy, and then what will become the Confederacy, and then the palmetto tree, Rev War symbol, coiled rattlesnake. They're harkening back to the Revolutionary War, the "Don't Tread on Me" snake that shows up actually in 1773, I think it first does, and some cannons. And then what they're saying here is built from the ruins, a new nation coming to pass, built from the ruins of an old one. Sheet music, if you go online, Duke University used to have a lot of the Southern sheet music online, and you'll see a ton of flags on there. I think the sheet music is really cool. So a case can definitely be made that what would become the war begins in Kansas and Missouri in 1850s. The Free Soilers versus the pro-slavery elements, and they're literally fighting each other. It's a very nasty place. How many people know that Missouri was the #3 state for battles? Virginia won, Tennessee 2, and nobody gets Missouri #3. There are a lot of battles out there. And several companies from South Carolina formed and marched out to Missouri to fight with the pro-slavery forces. Here are 3 of their flags. These are in the Kansas State Museum. The Palmetto Guards up top, the South Carolina Minutemen with a very crude rattlesnake, the Lone Star motif, which we'll talk about. And then this was a South Carolina unit. We don't know who it was, but it was captured by an Illinois unit. It's in the Illinois State Museum collection, coiled rattlesnake and palmetto tree. They captured that in 1861, but the flag dates to the mid-1850s. So this are flags that they're actually being used in combat well before the war begins. And of course, the South Carolina militia will start to seize, upon the secession of the state in December 1860, the fortifications around Charleston Harbor, with the exception of Fort Moultrie, which the Federals had, and Fort Sumter. And the commander of Fort Moultrie will move the garrison from Moultrie to Fort Sumter and really honk off the governor of South Carolina and the local people, because they know Fort Sumter is going to be a bigger nut to crack. So this is the militia taking Castle Pinckney, and that's the actual flag they used. That's the period drawing, that's the actual flag. It also became the flag of a sailing ship called the SS Dixie. If you go to the Market House Museum in Charleston, you can see that flag, and it's very big. And this is a nice, beautiful secession banner that's in a private collection. The Lone Star, which again we'll talk about. These are painted devices. You'll see some embroidery, but embroidery was very expensive, time consuming, and embroidery and silk over time don't work well together. They will start to tear. If you look at the 1861 Union flag regulations, they wanted embroidered battle honors and embroidered unit designations. When you're raising the Army from 16,500 men to 2 million, you're not embroidering your flags, you're painting them. Just much, much quicker. And the South will do the same thing when they get to professional flag makers. These are some interesting flags. We call them exclusionary flags. And obviously, what flags are based on? Stars and Stripes of the United States. Except they're only putting in the states that represent the South. You know what state these were pretty popular in? We're standing in it. I found a number of things in Alabama newspapers from 1860 and early 61 describing these flags being hoisted, being raised. There was an Alabama unit that came, I think it's the 27th Alabama, that came up to fight in Fort Henry Donaldson by where I live, and they left their flag behind at Fort Henry, as did the 10th Tennessee Infantry. And basically, it was a Stars and Stripes flag, and they just took all the stars off of it. It's in a private collection in California today. So, and then the Montgomery True Blues, who fought with Forrest at the Battle of Selma in 1865, you know what flag they fought under? Their 1860 militia flag. That was the Stars and Stripes, and had the name Montgomery True Blues on it. So the federal James Wilson captures it, and they go, well, there's a Montgomery County, Maryland, Montgomery County, Ohio, Montgomery, they assumed it's a northern flag, and who knows where it is now. But that's what the Montgomery True Blues are fighting. But this was a very popular design here in Alabama and one or two other places as well. Here's some more, we call them inclusionary flags. Again, sheet music, there you go, the Secession Quick Step, and a couple others. This one's actually from North Carolina, appeared about 10, 12 years ago. And then 15 stars would represent, on that flag there, represents the 15 slave states, which include Maryland, Delaware, and Kentucky, Missouri. So the secession flags in Alabama. Now there's a myth about this flag that this was the state flag of Alabama. Alabama never enacted a legislative state flag. We flag historians say an official state flag is passed by an act of the legislature as a law, or as a bill, signed into law by the governor. Moore, was Governor Moore, I think was the governor of Alabama then. And then they would say the flag of the state of Alabama will be, describe it, yes, no, passes, governor goes, okay, signs it, and then they start making them. This flag actually is going to date to November 1860, but it was the one that was hoisted over the state capitol building in Montgomery, your current state capitol building. And it was made of silk, painted devices, and it was up there for a couple weeks, and then in came a bad thunderstorm and shredded the flag. Silk and bad weather do not get along. That's why Navy flags are not made of silk, or big fort flags are not made of silk. But here's a parade here in downtown Montgomery. There's the state capitol. Now, take a look at that flag. Cross of St. George on there. We found some of those down in the Mobile area. One of the flags that was hoisted, it's either over Fort Morgan or Fort Gaines, had the St. George's Cross with a blue star in the middle. That has to do with the English heritage of the South. There's another myth I'm going to shoot down. And we'll get to that more and more. The South was overwhelmingly English. I talk with genealogists and I say, can you tell them about the Scottish Celtic thing? And they just start laughing and they go, no, they're English. And then you have pockets of Celtic Scots, particularly in the highlands of Georgia, South Carolina, things of that nature. Lower Alabama, see, got that right, is French.
Yeah.
Before and after the Napoleonic era, the French. That's where Mardi Gras starts. Okay. Mardi Gras starts in Mobile. I've been down there a while, beautiful city.
Yep.
Here's a beautiful Alabama society, and that's a period description from November from an Alabama newspaper describing the flag you just saw. The Alabama Archives has what's left of that flag. It was a very big flag, and unfortunately, it would cost many thousands of dollars to conserve it. This one comes from Mobile, the Young Men's Secession Association. Beautiful painted flag that's also down at ADAH. If you haven't been there, they have an amazing flag collection. The former curator is a longtime friend, and their current curator is a good friend as well. It's a great, great collection to go see. Secession flags in Florida, that was one that we don't know what part of the state it came from, but you see the rights of the South at all hazards, and then the first 3 states that go out. This one had been mistakenly described as the Florida secession flag. It only flew in Pensacola. And the description of the flag comes from a U.S. Navy officer commanding a ship. That's looking through his telescope and go, okay, above Fort Barrancas is this flag that looks like the Stars and Stripes. It's only got 1 star in it. So that's where we get the drawing from, is his description of that. And the former curator of the Florida State Museum says all the research he did, he only pinned it to Pensacola. Georgia secession flags, this is in Savannah, the big monument that's still there. They're hoisting this secession man with a coiled rattlesnake, and says our motto, Southern rights, equality of states. And this is from the Charleston Mercury, describing the flag that you're looking at. It's more of a banner. The Charleston Mercury is one of 2 Confederate newspapers that loved to write about flags. The other one was the Richmond, Virginia Dispatch. But the Mercury was flag central. So if you want to have some fun, go on newspaperarchive.com, scroll up the Mercury and just start looking at flags. Love to talk about it. Now this one, last time I saw it was at Fort Pulaski off Savannah. It's owned by the Georgia Historical Society. This is a big secession banner. Talking about from that corner to the other side of that pillar and floor to here. All painted by a guy named Furman Servo, who signed it right there. And Servo was an Armenian immigrant to Savannah and became known as a mural painter. There's a book called Servo's Savannah, so if you wanted a mural painted, you hired him to do it. And you can see when the war comes, he moves into making secession banners and even some early Georgia Civil War flags. So here's South Carolina gone out. Here's these other states that have gone out. Hands on the sword. Here's the federal eagle threatening. And where's the claws of the eagle? Not on the olive branch, on the arrows. Because the claw of the eagle and the way the eagle is looking on our national coat of arms has the claws on both, but the beak and the head is looking towards the olive branch. Not this one. That means war. They're getting serious. So this, if you get to see this, I stood and stared at this for probably 20 minutes. I mean, looking at every inch of the painting. It's a beautiful, beautiful flag. This is a Georgia secession banner, but look, 1859. Somebody's thinking way ahead. A guy named William Mackey paints it. Is the only flag I've ever found that he's ever done. Coiled rattlesnake, state rights, and don't tread on me, or Latin to be noli me tangere. Don't tread on me goes again back to the Revolutionary War era. So here's some secession flags. The upper left one was captured in Savannah. It's up in Green Bay, Wisconsin, for somehow got up there. And these two are from the Bolesław Masti collection. Bolesław and Marie Masti were Polish immigrants to the United States in the 1940s, became very successful businessman, and fell in love with American flags and started buying and collecting flags. He passed away some years ago, and his collection was sold at auction. I did the flag letter for this one, as a matter of fact. Unfortunately, that amazing color, there's a book on there, you can find on Masti's flags, but he had an amazing collection. The Louisiana secession flags, the Pelican flag dates to the War of 1812. It's the coat of arms of the state of Louisiana today, the pelican feeding its young. And then you see one up here in the corner, obviously based on the French tricolor, but turned sideways instead of the bars going vertically, which is what they should have been. You only see 6 stars on that. So these flags are going to start showing up. Pelican flags in the New Orleans papers get reported quite a bit. Texas. How many have ever been to Texas? I lived there for a while. Only state in the union that when people will apply to a job, and when I've seen this, will put native-born Texas on the job application. They fly their state flag more than any American state you will ever see. Every time I go to Texas twice a year, and you see that flag flying all the time. This dates to 1839, and was the flag of the Republic of Texas, which of course becomes a state in 1845. And then these are secession era flags as well as described in Texas newspapers of the time. 80% plus of Texas Confederate soldiers, and the same number goes for Arkansas, were not born in those 2 states. They're immigrants. So when the secession starts happening in early 1860 of Texas, and the Lone Star flags, these, by the way, these are considered Lone Star flags too, besides the official one. So many new people had moved into the state that the newspapers had to write articles. This is what the official flag of Texas looks like. And they're talking about this one. So people go, oh, okay, because I wasn't here in 1845 or 1839. I just moved here, 2 years ago. So they're not going to know. So I always got a kick out of that. And you start to realize how many soldiers that came, and just people in general in those 2 states, didn't live there prior to like 5 or 10 years before the war. There were new immigrants into that state. So this is the rise of the palmetto tree, the South Carolina secession flag, and now the state flag. This is the drawing of them, some southern boys from South Carolina, and this is Yale University, way up north, and they're hoisting up the palmetto flag with the St. George's Cross over the chapel there, and created a heck of a stink. I mean, people went nuts over this. You can see the crowd starting to gather. The popularity of the palmetto flags when South Carolina secedes in December 1860 is such that a flag maker, or 2 flag makers actually up in New York, this was made by a lady named Sarah McFadden, will start mass printing these and shipping them down to the South. The South did not have the printing technology at the time. So these were made in New York and shipped down. I've found some stuff about Sarah McFadden. I forget the name of the other guy that was doing it. There was a regular steamship line that went from Charleston to Philadelphia and Charleston to New York. It was like a daily run. So getting stuff out of New York and Philadelphia was a piece of cake. In fact, Philadelphia was so pro-South, they had a newspaper called the Palmetto Flag. Why? Because they're following the trade, the economics of their city. And this is the former U.S. Arsenal in Charleston with a palmetto flag now hoisted over its top. So this is the rise of this flag, and I'm going to argue this is the flag that is actually the most predominant of the secession patterns. Here's another bit of sheet music. You get a Lone Star with a palmetto on there. This flag was at the National Civil War show. It's silk, it's about this big. These are the South Carolina gamecock, and then putting gamecocks and the other ones, and then a Latin cross at the top. The bottom one there is at Fort Sumter. It was flown from a ship called the John H. Jones that put into New York Harbor, and after she tied up, They lowered the US flag and hoisted this one, and New York went nuts. What is this? Because they could read the papers. Things were getting telegraphed and stuff back and forth. They knew what was going on. So New York goes nuts. They come back to Charleston. The skipper is hailed as a hero, and he gives the flag to the Palmetto Guard, which is one of the units that will help capture Fort Sumter. That's why Fort Sumter has it today. Now, this is the beginning of the Lone Star flag. How many of you ever heard of the West Florida Republic? Not a long time lived thing. That's where the border. Here's East Florida, Perdido River being the boundary. So there's Lower Alabama, Mobile, then you got Biloxi and all that stuff, and then moving north of Pontchartrain, here's New Orleans, over to about Natchez here. Actually, yeah, about Natchez there, and that's the West Florida Republic. Long story short, the same thing happened in Texas. You have Anglos moving into this. It was owned by the Spanish, and then the French got it, and then the Spanish got it back because of the Napoleonic era. And these filibusters marched on the garrison at Baton Rouge and threatened to take it over, and the flag they used was this. Now, the one that you always see is just a blue flag with a white star with no border. Well, this is from 1810, the Richmond newspaper. I got a kick out of it because it cites Clarksville, Tennessee, and it describes the flag. It's got a blue with a white border and a large star in the center. That's what the original Bonnie blue flag is supposed to look like, not just blue with a white star. So that the Lone Star will become also a flag of secession and a resistance to perceived or real tyranny throughout American history. And then, of course, Harry McCarthy happens to be passing through Jackson, Mississippi, when the Republic of Mississippi is declared. By the way, the first 7 states to go out declare themselves sovereign republics because they're obeying the constitutional provision that no 2 states can enter into a compact with each other. That violates the Federal Supremacy Clause. So they figure out to make this as legal as possible. The Republic of Alabama will ally with the Republic of Louisiana, the Republic of Georgia, Republic of South Carolina. I've actually seen stationery printed that says Republic of Georgia on it. Didn't last long because creating the Confederate government down in Montgomery starting in February. But that's what the original intent was. So McCarthy is in Jackson, Mississippi, where Mississippi secedes, and hoists a flag with a blue flag with a white star, and he's inspired to take an Irish song called Irish Jaunting Car and change the lyrics to the Bonnie Blue Flag. And he is going to become the Tom Jones of the era. He's a superstar. Women will throw their underwear at him while he's on stage. The Hood's Texas Brigade is marching to go to Virginia, and they stop and see him performing. He was huge. He did not have a good copyright lawyer, however, because everybody started printing up their own version of sheet music, so he got to squat on royalties. This was how records were sold in those days, sheet music. Because you had pianos at home and harpsichords, and you went down to your store that sold that, and you bought it, and hopefully McCarthy made some money out of that. So he's the guy that popularizes this flag pattern into a song that becomes huge in the Confederacy. And unfortunately, the Palmetto flag doesn't get the hit record to go along with it, even though I've documented 4 more Palmetto flags. When Georgia goes out in January of 1861, Georgia state troops will march on the arsenal, U.S. Arsenal in Augusta, Georgia, which is still there. It's part of the campus of Augusta State University. So if you're down for the massacre sometime, you can go see this. The irony of this is the U.S. commander of that arsenal was Captain, I'm going to remember what his name is. Hang on, commanded the Maryland troops. Well, he was Arnold Elzey, there you go. He was a captain, resigns his commission later, becomes a Confederate brigadier general in Lee's Army, North Virginia. But he will surrender it. You can see the drawing. That's the actual flag. That's the Augusta Richmond Museum in Augusta, Georgia. Red with white. So there's going to be variants of Lone Star flags. Here we are, some Lone Star unit colors. That's a Mississippi unit, 2nd. The Pontotoc Minutemen, the 9th Alabama, that's actually out in Missouri. We had biggest time trying to figure out who they were, but we got it pinned down. This is an unknown flag up in the Milwaukee Public Museum. I love the slogans, patriotic slogans. United we stand, above we fall, and against the world's assembled powers we will defend what God hath given. Someday before I die, I hope to do an essay analyzing the patriotic slogans on early war Confederate flags. There's some more. 1st South Carolina Militia, the St. Helena Mounted Rifles. That's Terry's Texas Rangers, the 8th Texas Cavalry that was captured by the 32nd Indiana at the Battle of Rowland Station, Kentucky. December 1861, I just drove by there about 3 weeks ago, and the monument where Randall Terry was killed is there. And when first time I ever went to the Alamo, they had that flag on display, the Alamo City Guards. I like how they put an apostrophe in there, like it's the Alamo City Possessive Guards. Say, there we go. Some more unit colors. There's the 3rd Alabama Cavalry's flag, states' rights. That's the Wilcox Dragoons. 6th Texas Cavalry Battalion, and just to make sure you know they're Texans, they put Texas on there. Because that's how Texans think, if you hung out with them like I have for a couple years. And a big star, and then just to show you how Texans still think in 1864, that's the replacement flag of the 6th Texas Infantry, 15th Texas Cavalry. That's a Harvey pattern flag, and the only one for a Texas unit that took their lone star on the side. And then you have TEXAS around the points. So more Lone Star flags. Again, that's the 1st Texas state flag. They lost both of their colors in Miller's Cornfield at the Battle of Antietam. Colonel Work, commanding the 1st Texas, you can go through the official records, and I have all 120 lines looking for flag stuff, and you can count on maybe 2 hands how many commanding officers will admit that their unit lost flags in battle. You have to look at the other side. We captured the flag of Work actually admits we pulled what was left of us out of the cornfield, and to my horror, our colors, both, were still out there. And the Federals got them. This flag was much longer. You see 2 battle honored 7 Pines, Gaines Farm, Eltham's Landing, and Malvern Hill are the other 2 that's Malvern Hill right there, and Eltham's Landing up top that have kind of faded away, but that's a historic flag. This one was captured, I think, at Arkansas Post. It's in Findlay, or was in Findlay, Ohio. And then that's a drawing of what Company L, the Lone Star Rifles flag would look like. So state flags, these are ones that are adopted officially by state legislatures, all right? So South Carolina has a proposal they will submit, you see the date up there, with what they call a palmetto tree in natural colors. And it goes to the state legislature, and they're like, nah, we kind of like this a little better, it kind of stands out more. So that's the one that's going to win. It's going to adopt on January 28th. Of 1861, and then here is the newspaper article from the Macon, Georgia Telegraph talking about it. Guess what flag still exists as a Confederate flag today? That one. That's the flag of South Carolina to this day. And it's really fun. I always thought it'd be kind of fun to confuse the people that don't like Confederate flags by saying, hey, what about this? That's a really pretty flag.
I ain't learned that yet.
Don't tell them it's Confederate. They'll never know unless they read a book. They don't do that very often. So the historical use of the crescent on there dates back to the Battle of Fort Moultrie during the Revolutionary War. You see the British Royal Navy out there pounding Fort Moultrie, which was made of palmetto logs, a soft wood that with the dirt would absorb the kinetic energy of British cannonballs. Then as Sergeant William Jasper, the flagstaff gets shot down, and he picks the colors up and puts a new flagstaff up, and that's him up there under fire, hoisting the colors of Fort Moultrie back up again. And that's where the crescent will come from. South Carolina troops will wear a crescent on their hats during the Rev War, and then continue on. In 1839, the State Militia Act codified the palmetto flag for all South Carolina militia units. But this one actually predates it. That's the Abbeville Dragoons from 1833, a cavalry unit. That just turned up about 10 years ago. And the palmetto flag of the Palmetto Regiment from the Mexican War does not exist, but that's their regimental colors. Carry that in the campaign to Mexico. Here's some state battle flags. South Carolina 7th Battalion over there, Orr's Regiment of Rifles. The reverse side of that is a Confederate First National. It's painted. How do you get the paint from not bleeding through? Because the paint would have done it on the other side. You make 2 flags and sew them together. That's the only way you can do it. There's a number of 2-sided flags. There's the Martin Guards of 13th South Carolina. That was painted by a gentleman from Columbia named G.G. Newton. He signed that one. But once you get to understand what painters do with their style, there's 2 other flags that is a really narrow, high branch palmetto tree that he didn't sign, but we know he did them. Because if you could hold them next to each other, yeah, he did that one too. So once you learn an artist style, you can pick that up pretty quick. Here's the University Rifleman. It's at Furman University. When I saw this about 30 years ago, it was in a frame in the men's room in the library. God knows where they have it now. It's a really, really pretty flag. Palmetto, you see, the Piedmont, because they're from Greenville, a cannon and stuff like that. That's Second South Carolina Cavalry, a swallowtail guidon. And then down here, the Fort Walker flag, this dates from the Secession era because it's based on US colors. But just to let you know that they're from South Carolina, by God, there's 2 palmetto trees on there. And when Fort Walker's captured, 1862, the Federals will walk away with that one. It was, what's left of it's still pretty large. Mississippi adopts its own official republic state flag in January, late January. And if you read the text of the law, a lot of Mississippi guys get it wrong. You have a blue field with a white star and a white field with a magnolia tree in the center, which is the state tree of Mississippi. And then no red border. But if you read the flag law, it's got a red border all the way around. Because if you have something that's white, it's the same problem the Confederate Second National is going to be. If it's hanging limp, it looks like a flag of truce or a flag of surrender. So that's why they put the red border. Plus, I think it's just a little more striking. This is a flag of the 3rd Mississippi Infantry. It was captured down in the Gulf Coast area, down around Biloxi. And then these are a couple other ones, the Duncan Riflemen. That's actually a Scots Thistle. They were a Scottish unit. Touch me not, or touch not with impunity. And that's the Dahlgren, the Lamar Rifles, excuse me, of the 11th Mississippi. And they managed to get their Lone Star on their flag as well. There's some more Mississippi colors. This is the Wayne Rifles.
Real quick.
Sure.
The Mississippi state flag that you showed on the previous slide.
Yep.
Is the star on the fly end or the cant or the?
That's the reverse side.
Okay.
Yeah, the obverse is the, here's your flag technology lesson for the day, ladies and gentlemen. The hoist side of the flag, if it's on the left, that's called the obverse. If the hoist side of the flag is on the right, that's called the reverse. So that's the reverse side. Thank you for bringing that up, because that's a good point. So yeah, that's what the side. It would be the same on the other.
Just usually people will show from hoist to fly,
Yeah.
and not the other way around.
Yeah, well, here's another one, it's reverse
Yeah.
side, and that's the official photograph from the Mississippi Archives. I'm assuming I've never seen a photograph of the other side, but you can see the letters ate through the paint at high acid content, so it ate through. But it's Wayne Rifles in reverse, and then their slogan in Latin, and that's what the drawing would look like. And then the Burt Rifles down below. When Mississippi was having its state flag issues a couple of years ago, I was voting for the Magnolia flag to come out. I just think it's a pretty flag. It was one of my favorite flags from 1861, and nobody would have known what it was. It was great. The Pelican flag we've talked about a bit. Louisiana, for whatever reason, when they become a sovereign nation for a while, in February, they decided to create their own distinctive flag. I've read some of the text of the Louisiana legislature, and they say the Pelican's a scavenger, we can do better than that. And I said, well, wait a minute, our boys have been fighting under that flag since the Battle of New Orleans. Why do you want to take away something that means something to our military history? So what do they come up with? They take a flag based on the stars and stripes. Well, let's add in not only the United States, but Spanish and French heritage. So we're going to put a whole bunch of different bars on there, and that will become their official state flag. Not many of these are made. I know maybe less than 10. And I'll show you one in the next slide that just turned up a few years ago. That was captured by the 13th Connecticut, and this was the 9th Louisiana Parks and Rangers, which is a mounted infantry unit. Obviously French, because they put a French tricolor in there. As so many Louisiana units were of French descent. And despite the same flag, some units said, to heck with it, we're going to keep a pelican on our flag. I have read the Union accounts of the Battle of Shiloh, April 1862, and one Union commander says, I can see a pelican flag in my front. That's Ashley Gladden's brigade he's talking about. So somebody was still carrying a pelican color at the Battle of Shiloh. And even here, Dro's battalion, 1st Louisiana, they still put a pelican in their canton. They don't want to turn their back on it. And that's an unknown flag that came out of Edward Stanton, Secretary of War of the United States. It's now at the former Museum of the Confederacy. It was bought by a friend of mine who donated it to them, much to the chagrin of Memorial Hall, who at the time didn't have one, and now they've since got one. They just swapped with Texas. Virginia and North Carolina are the only 2 Confederate states that will make a concerted effort from the beginning of the war to the end of the war to make state flags for her troops. And when they adopt their official flag in April 1861, the governor, John Letcher, I found all these documents in the John Letcher files at the Virginia Historical Society, and they're paying guys to do flags. So here's Hugh Keene painting 25 state flags. Here's Moses Middledorfer, a Jewish dry goods dealer in Richmond. 19 yards of blue merino, French, a very fine French combed wool. What else we got here? Oh, and white merino for the white disc in the center. George Ruskell, major flag maker for Virginia. Bunting flag for the Capitol buildings. That was the Virginia state flag for them. This is, where are you? John Thompson, making 20 state regimental flags for Virginia troops. And then here's another guy, Thomas Smith, for making, let's see, selling dry goods, 20 yards of blue merino. So the dry goods dealers have the cloth, the state goes out with purchasing agents, buys it up, and then turns it over to these flag makers, and they will start pumping them out to Virginia troops. And the first issue of flags will be October 30th of 1861 in Centerville, Virginia. Governor John Letcher comes up with a wagon load of these, calls all the Virginia troops together, and does a presentation ceremony to all of the Virginia units that were stationed there at the time. And here's what they would have looked like. I love the fact that there's your Virginia coat of arms, 6 Semper Tyrannis, Lady Liberty over the tyrant, and depending on the artist, the lady's looking this way, looking that way, kind of looking slightly straight ahead. We don't know enough of who made which flag to know which artist did it. But one thing I like about the flags of 61 is this is the end of Jacksonian America. And the attitude is, if it's not written down, we can do it, right? To which I've amended, even if it's written down, we'll do what we want. Artistic taste, Americans not depending on the government telling them what to do, doing what they want. And that's the reverse side of the Lancaster Cavalry of the 9th Virginia Cavalry, which was, by the way, the last Virginia Cavalry unit to make a charge at Athens. They played in the morning of the surrender. Here's some more Virginia state flags. I love these with the Rococo style of framing around them, the Bonatorp Dragoons, the 4th Virginia Cavalry, the Black Horse Troop, and then that is the Norfolk Light Artillery Blues. The other side has George Washington's face painted on there.
Greg, I'll have to provide one little bit of correction to you. It's Botetourt.
Are you a Virginian?
No.
Oh, okay.
Well, natively, yes, but I
Okay.
did not know that until recently.
Oh, okay. Well, it doesn't surprise me. My Confederate ancestors from West Virginia, west of Charleston, on what is spelled Kanawha River. And I went there one time and said, "This is the Kanawha River." I go, no, the Kanawha. So it's Botetourt?
Botetourt.
Botetourt.
The R's
They have some weird names over there.
Yeah, the R's not even there. It's Botetourt.
Okay, so the R doesn't get pronounced. Thank you. Appreciate that. I'd like to learn something. So here's some Virginia militia era flags, the 115th Regiment, give me liberty or give me death. Who said that was big in Virginia? There you go. They knew history, ladies and gentlemen, back in these days. More than we do today. Even what we would consider the ill-educated knew what happened 70, 80, 90 years prior in the United States. Here's the New Kent Cavalry, Stars and Stripes with the Virginia coat of arms. This is a flag, Gordonsville Grays, made by Thomas Jeffries in Baltimore. Thomas Jeffries, 4 other flag makers in Baltimore, and Horsemen's of Philadelphia were more than happy to make flags for Southern units up into 1861 until April 12th. Then what happened? Fort Sumter. And then they went, can't do that anymore, they're shooting. So a lot of these flags, like this one does date from 1860, but some of the earlier ones, and some of those, like I went through the Paul Semmes papers in Georgia a few years ago, future Confederate Brigadier General, he was the purchasing agent for Georgia. He's up buying weapons from Colt in January and February 1860 in Connecticut and shipping them down to Georgia. And they're happy to go, yeah, we're getting money. And then Fort Sumter changed all that. Same thing's gonna happen with the flags. North Carolina adopts its state flag in June 1861. This is an early version, 6th Infantry North Carolina State Troops. I could go for an hour explaining how the North Carolinians denominated their regiments. You have volunteers, state troops, reserves, and there's probably one other I'm leaving out. The state troops were raised, the 10 Regiment were raised to serve the state, but they ended up leaving the state. This is damask curtain silk. You can barely see the pattern there. That silk was used for curtains. And the ladies that made the flag took it and made it into their flag and painted it. And then this is the state flag as it would come to be known. May 20th, 1775. Hey, wait a minute, that's ahead of July 4th, 1776. That's the Mecklenburg Declaration. You know, North Carolina history. They actually tried to secede from Britain before the other 12 colonies did. So that they changed, and then May 20th, 1861. That date is still on the flag, that date isn't. They changed it, and they also reversed the colors. That's the state flag of the 2nd Regiment State Troops. from 1861, made in Norfolk, Virginia, by a gentleman up there who did 10 of these flags and then shipped them down. I found the documents in a North Carolina Treasury records some years ago. That was captured, I believe, at Antietam in the Sunken Road. Florida will actually adopt the state flag, and none of them exist. We've not found a single one in September. Obviously based on the Confederate First National, adding its own little devices. So the only early Florida flags we know of, the Apalachicola Guards, that's their militia color. You can see the Federal Eagle in the center. And then this is my favorite of the Florida early company colors, the Florida Independent Blues. Here's the 7 states with the date of each state going out, cotton boil or ball, and then any fate but submission is their slogan. Georgia never does adopt the state flag, but the coat of arms that you see there dates back to 1799. In Mexico City, in their museum, they have a Georgia coat of arms flag. And I actually paid $150 for the book. I can read Spanish because I lived in South America for 4 years, California for 15, Texas for 2. And I was reading the book, and I emailed the curator down there and said, "You have this as a Walker filibuster flag?" He said, "That's the Georgia coat of arms, 1799. I said a whole bunch of stuff. He said, "Thank you for identifying the flag." I said, "Georgia would really like to get it back." Because they don't have any flags that early in there. And that flag comes from the Texas Border War. After Texas wins its independence in 1836, they fight with Mexico in 1842 over the border of Texas. The Texans think it's the Rio Grande, the Mexicans think it's the Nueces River. And by the way, Texas lost every battle in the border war. And that was a Georgia company that came over to fight with the Texans. So the typical one, you'll see blue, there's your coat of arms with the soldier typically posted here. This is another 2-sided flag. The first Georgia regulars, the reverse side is a Confederate First National. That's an actual picture of the swearing in of Jefferson Davis at your Capitol building down in Montgomery. They had a military parade afterwards, a bunch of troops marching. The lead unit was a Georgia unit carrying a Georgia coat of arms flag, according to the Montgomery newspaper. But they never will adopt an official state flag. So here's some other flags. This is the DeKalb Riflemen. I'll talk about that in a second. That's the McIntosh Guards of 26th Georgia. Interesting story, when the 26th Georgia was coming up from the coastal part of Georgia to fight in the Army of Northern Virginia, they left that flag on the train. And the Richmond newspaper goes, "Hey, anybody around here named McIntosh Guards?" Because it says it on the other side. "Because you left your flag on the train. How dare you do that to something so sacred?" So they have to kind of suck it up and go, "Okay, we got it." It's back in the Georgia Capitol Collection. This was down in Savannah. We don't know who the unit is, other than the Effingham Guards, who haven't tied them into a regiment. And remember what I said, the soldier here? Hey, no, we're gonna put him over here. I've seen him over here. I've seen him under that arch. Even though the official thing says he goes there. The DeKalb Rifleman has a Georgia coat of arms on the reverse side. That flag is green. What do you typically think of when you think green flags? Irish. If you know anything about the colors of the branches of the United States Army, yellow is cavalry, red artillery, blue is infantry, there's a lot more now. Green were rifle units. The DeKalb Riflemen. That's why they got a green flag. Not an Irishman in the unit. They're from DeKalb County, Georgia, near Atlanta. No Irish there. The Irish are on the coast. Tennessee also never adopts a state flag. That was what the proposed model would have looked like, obviously patterned after the First National. But at least 3 flags exist that follow it. This is the Lebanon Grays from Wilson County, just east of Nashville. That was the First National once upon a time, blue, red, white, and red, but the dyes have faded. And then this is what's left of the 24th Tennessee Infantry. The coat of arms is missing. I forget who the third one was that had a coat of arms. So even though, and people are just assuming, well, it's in the newspaper, it must be true. So it's paper. That's what they did. Missouri doesn't officially lead the Union, but they have a rump secession convention, a pro-Confederate governor who gets chased across the state after the Camp Jackson affair in St. Louis, where this flag is captured from the 1st Missouri Volunteer Infantry, including John Bowen. And then they get chased across the state, and then the Missouri State Guard rallies and chases the Yankees back towards St. Louis. They will actually adopt an official flag for the Missouri State Guard, the pro-Southern militia of Missouri, and using the coat of arms of the state to do it. They had lost Jefferson City at the time, and they lost St. Louis, so they will send officers to Memphis and take out ads in the paper. Ladies, we need shirts, socks, underwear, and oh, by the way, if you know how to make flags, come see us, we'll give you a drawing of what it looks like. Some of these flags were made in Memphis, and some were made just over the line in Mississippi. They had a quartermaster agent there that advertised for this stuff. Having said that, the bulk of the surviving Missouri State Guard flags are all First Nationals. But we know they were there because I have details of the Battle of Lexington, the Battle of Carthage. This is the First Missouri militia that are First Missouri volunteers that mustered at Camp Jackson, and the Germans took umbrage to that and captured them and those colors. Now, you think of a crescent as tying in with South Carolina, it also ties in with Missouri. It means the outhouse is over there. Maryland doesn't leave the Union either, but contributes troops to both sides. But Lee's army has a number of Maryland troops in it, both in Virginia units and in Maryland units as well, as a company of the 21st Virginia, which is a Maryland unit. And then you see the Calvert coat of arms, which is the coat of arms of the state of Maryland today. It's the only European or English-inspired coat of arms that's still used by an American state. And then that's the flag of the 1st Missouri, or the 1st Maryland Infantry, excuse me. Some later patterns will also use state coat of arms. If you go to Newmarket Battlefield, you'll see this flag here, Southern Grays. And typically what they will often do, I'll talk about more with this one. Yeah, this one does too. These two flags were both United States flags. Stripe, 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 stripe. And they just took them apart, re-sewed them, and kept the cannon. So that's how you quickly make up a First National. If you go to Corinth, Mississippi, you'll see the Corinth Rifles on display at the park. Unit of the 9th Mississippi Infantry. That was painted by a gentleman from Mobile named Jackson Belknap. Meeting in Montgomery, Alabama, of March 4th, 1861, hanging over your head like the sword of Damocles. What does that time limit mean to the Confederacy back then? We don't do this on March anymore. We do it on January 20th.
Inauguration
of Lincoln. The Confederates wanted to have a symbol of their nation on at least one flagpole somewhere in the South, preferably Montgomery, because that's where they were meeting. So the heat is on, because they don't seat the Confederate Congress until early February. So the clock is very much ticking. And the guy who they put in charge of this, and I'll have a picture of him pretty quick, William Portia Miles, congressman from South Carolina, was an expert on heraldry. Heraldry is European. When the Europe breaks up after the fall of the Western Roman Empire, and then little dukedoms and fiefdoms start back together, and then they start to form smaller nations who will eventually become bigger nations. And when you have guys clanking around in tin armor, head to toe, how do you tell your tin armor guys from the other guys wearing tin armor? You develop heraldry. Cloth that hangs over the armor with some symbol of the Duke or the Prince or the King or whatever. That's where heraldry comes from. And Miles was an expert on that, and that's why he gets the job to run the flag committee. I have a copy of the flag book. It's at the National Archives, and have gone through it. The greatest number of submissions, 104, were inspired by the flag of the United States. The sentiment being, a whole mess of Southern boys fought for that flag. Mexican War, War of 1812, Seminole Wars, on and on, Red War, all on and on and on. They weren't mad at the flag, they were mad at the government that they thought was misusing the flag. So that's your big inspiration. And Miles, who's a fire eater, is like, oh my gosh, this is not gonna work. We need something more, quote, Confederate. But look what the sentiment of the Southern people is. You saw this in your Athens newspaper or Montgomery newspaper, Huntsville newspaper. Flag committee looking for flags, and you can draw or you can sew. And hey, I think like this flags, you sew something, you draw it, you ship it down to Montgomery. To Dear Portia Miles, I think this will be the flag. Might look like this, might look like a dog. I'd follow that flag, that's too cute. But this is the number one submissions. The number two were the flags of unique designs. When I bought the first Jimi Hendrix album in 1967, that was the poster inside it. All you need is a black light, right? Remember the black lights? Look at him on his head over there. Black light, I never had one. You had one, didn't you? That would look awesome with a black light, I think. But you can see, that had to come from Maryland, because that's Calvert Arms inspired. But you can see that, and Miles will say in his report, that these flags of what he called a fantastical design were just not practical. How do you mass produce this? You don't. You just don't. So, but they're real cool to look at. I like the comet with the eye of God in the center going through there. Second number of submissions, 55. The third number were crosses of St. George. Here's where the myth of the South being Scottish, Celtic, whatever, gets shot down. They were overwhelmingly English. That's the flag of England. What was the big book in the South prior to the war? Ivanhoe, British Knight. They wanted to be Englishmen, and the society was very much set up like the English one. You had the upper class, you had a middle class, and then nobody talked to anybody that was in the lower class, kind of like what the English still do. But 33 of these, but you can see some really pretty designs that will come out of this. Miles starts getting these in, and he will get, when he publish, these things are published. You move through the Journal of the Confederate Congress, they describe these, the newspapers describe these. When the Jewish community of Charleston catches wind of this, they sent Miles a letter that said, the guy's name was Charles Moisey, was their spokesman. They said, this ain't gonna fly, that's a Christian flag, and we're not gonna support it. Well, it's not the Latin cross, but to them it's similar. Then fundamentalist Christian sects started writing in saying, you're abusing the flag of our church, that's not how we're gonna play. So keep that in mind. So Miles is getting all this correspondence, as are the other members of the committee. One member from each state. That is the actual book at the National Archives. So you get letters, drawings, some people actually made some flags. I like this one, the eye of God and the hand coming out of the clouds and things like that. And here's some other ones from the actual scrapbook. They don't even show you that book anymore. They have color Xeroxes of it that you can see. Some more flag submissions that look kind of familiar with what's going to be happening. The late Deborah O'Cannon thinks that Catherine Ladd's submission here had a lot of sway on the Confederate Flag Committee. That's George Washington there in the center, obviously the father of the United States. There's Portia Miles now. The South Carolina sovereignty flag was that, another St. George's cross. And he says, again, getting the flack from the fundamentalist Christian sects and the Jews of Charleston, not going to happen. I'm going to take this cross and tilt it on its angle, and he says it's the saltire of heraldry. If you get a book on heraldry, you see that cross, it says saltire, S-A-L-T-I-R-E or I-E-R, correct both ways. He never calls it the St. Andrew's Cross, ever. He's a heraldry guy. Now, what's the problem with this flag? 7 stars. This is one of the 4 finalists to the flag committee. A congressman from Mississippi sees it and says, that is a pair of blue suspenders to me. I guess he doesn't like it. I don't know. I'm taking his word. But it's asymmetrical because there's not enough stars. Now, if he had 8 stars, you could split them up 2, 2, 2, and 2. But there are only 7 at the time he does this. So the committee shoots this flag down. Nope, not going to happen. Here's the other 3 submissions. I don't get this one at all. That one makes no sense to me at all.
It looks like a target.
Yeah, there you go. With Lincoln's face in the middle.
There you go.
There you go. You like that better? And obviously inspired by the flag of the United States, that's what they come up with. That flag will be adopted on the 4th of March in the morning. Miles will stand before the Congress and read the flag committee's report, and he will say in there, you can see this in Alabama and other southern newspapers, none of the flags sent in being suitable. This flag was created by the committee. Talk about the mythology going down here. A drawing of this flag, once the Congress goes, yes sir, that's our flag, they run down to George Cowles, who runs a sewing machine place down there, make this, we got about an hour and a half. Get at it. Here's some cloth.
You know.
He gets on it, and it's taken down to the Alabama State Capitol. And the granddaughter of President John Tyler, Letitia Tyler, at 1 o'clock that afternoon, while Lincoln is being sworn in, that flag gets hoisted on the flagpole. In your face. In your face. So that is what happens. So here's some a bunch of First National flags, and it's my favorite of the Confederate flags because of the variety of stars. If I live long enough, I want to do a book on the First Nationals. 5, 7, 9, I think that's 12. There's a whole bunch. 15. You can see the cantons don't come down here. It's just, this is, even though the newspapers publish drawings of what the official flag is supposed to look like, 7 stars in a circle, harkening back to 13 stars of the U.S. flag. Look at that. Yes?
I read an article that the flag was designed in Marion, Alabama.
I'll get to that. Thank you for bringing that up. Good. I think it's in here. It should be in here. Yeah, we'll talk about that. That's one of the myths I'm gonna shoot down tonight at 40,000 feet with Sam missile. The first national flag is involved in the Marshall House affair, which creates martyrs for both sides simultaneously. How many of you been to Alexandria, Virginia, and walked the Potomac River? Where the Holiday Inn is today is a state historical marker, and that's where the Marshall House was. Mr. Marshall was a Southern patriot, with Washington right across the river, has made up this giant first national flag. Elmer Ellsworth of the Chicago Zouaves, now rising to command the 5th New York Zouaves, marshals his regiment, charges across the Chain Bridge into the Marshall House. He personally goes up the stairs, tears the flag down. As he's coming down, the shopkeeper blows him away with a shotgun. And he's immediately bayoneted by one of the Zouaves. So now you have two martyrs. And both sides newspapers make a big whoopee-doo about this for months. There's a recent book written about Elmer Ellsworth that just came out. In fact, I helped the author, who just recently passed from cancer, unfortunately, with some details I had in my file. That's what's left of the flag, heavily souvenired. This sucker was big. If you go to Fort Ward, one of the defenses of Washington, they have a star. The star's that big. There were 7 stars in this flag. It's a big, big flag. Here's our mythology, okay? Nicola Marshall, Marion, Alabama. Fort Randolph Smith, Franklin County, North Carolina. In the 1870s, the supporters of these two men start saying, Orrin Randolph Smith had the ear of the governor of Alabama, and he was in the right place, and he came up with, as he claims, after the war with this design, it becomes the first national, and then Orrin Smith makes the same claim right around the same time. You know what other claim shows up right around that time? The Betsy Ross designing the Stars and Stripes made by her grandson. She made them, she didn't design it. Francis Hopkins didn't design our flag. Betsy made lots of them, there's invoices for that. So all 3 of these myths show up within about 8 to 10 years of each other in the 1870s. So this is hilarious. How many ladies were in the UDC? Okay, Alabama chapter? Okay, you'll love this. My files on this are like this thing. The Alabama UDC declares war on the North Carolina UDC, who in turn declares war on the Alabama UDC. They could have solved this a lot better if they put on football helmets and met at some football field in the state, either state, and slugged it out. And my mother was convinced that if women fought the first war, there'd never been another war because they would all killed each other. So you know how that football game would have showed up. These two groups went at it for years, got their state legislatures involved. No, here's the affidavits that Orrin Randolph Smith and his daughter, Jessica, goes running around the state and the South. Daddy's daughter, says the headline, showing first national flags. She got free rides for years. Nobody bothered to read the March 4th, 1861 newspapers where Miles clearly said, no flags being suitable, the flag was designed by the committee. The copy of that flag book that's at the archives that I have, you can't find either name of these two gentlemen with a search warrant. Because it didn't happen. Sorry.
Okay.
You hate me?
No.
You hate me, don't hate me.
No.
Truth will set us free, right?
Right.
But it makes a great story. He's buried in Louisville, by the way. He was a Prussian immigrant. Supposedly designed the Confederate uniform. I'm not so sure that even happened. But yeah, and if you go to Gettysburg, I'm told by the Gettysburg guides, who have to memorize all the monuments, the North Carolina monument, the color bearer is his face. And when I gave a lecture to the Gettysburg guides about 15 years ago, I said, I'm gonna shoot this one down for you. That didn't happen. I went to sandblast that off and put another guy on there. So here's some first national flags are all captured in battle. These two, 18th Tennessee, 32nd Tennessee, captured at Fort Donelson. 47th Alabama, captured at Sharpsburg. This flag just turned up 6 weeks ago. The only extant flag of the 1st Mississippi Infantry, the Alcorn Rifles, Company F. It was captured at Fort Donelson, and a friend of mine has just bought it for $44,000. 40 for the flag and $4,000 for the conservation of the flag. Beautiful flag, and that's what the note right there says. Captured from surrendered forces of General Butler, November 16, 1862. These two flags from the Tennessee State Museum today, sent back from other states. Some more national flags. This one also turned up about 3 months ago. 3rd Division, 3rd Regiment, 6th Division, Missouri State Guard. The Missouri State Guard divisions were their version of militia districts. They just called them divisions instead of militia districts. So it was the 3rd Regiment that came out of the 6th. Again, they had, the Missouri State Guard had their distinctive flags. Most of the ones that survived were First Nationals. This one is Fort Henry's flag, captured when the Federals captured that. That's actually captured in the Atlanta campaign from a railroad car. Union Cavalry near Columbus pulled that out. No, near Macon pulled that out. And that was captured in the coastal attack of Burnside, North Carolina, 1861. Some more First Nationals, Pelican Fire Company. Even fire companies were part of the state militia, by the way. So that's why they would get these flags. These two are really cool. This is the Biderman Gillis flag. It's in California. It was hoisted in Sacramento. It has 17 stars. 15 slave states. In fact, I was debating somebody online on a flag group that I belonged to about I think it's Southern California because they were pro-secessionists, and New Mexico Territory, which then included Arizona because they were pro-secessionists. Follow your migratory patterns. Southern people going west stayed south. Northern people going west stayed north. That's why Southern California was pro-secession and Northern California was not. Having lived in California for 15 years, those two parts of the state still hate each other today. Can't stand each other. Especially with water out. This is an Indian treaty flag. You've seen, there's a number of these exist. I actually saw this one in person. So you have however many stars it is for the Confederate States, and the red stars for the 5 civilized tribes: Creek, Cherokee, Choctaw, Chickasaw, and the Seminole, who allied themselves predominantly with the Confederacy. The Cherokee were split. Some other ones: 14th Kentucky Cavalry, 14th Georgia. That's the 7th Georgia's flag that they used at. It's a replacement flag for, and I love this one, 1st Texas, or 11th Texas Cavalry. Here's one of the other pictures, the 3rd Arkansas Company H. That's their actual flag right there. That's one of the few you'll see. This one was painted by Nicola Marshall of Mobile for the shooter rifles of the 14th Mississippi. When they surrendered at Fort Donelson, the Federals got the flag, but the color bearer pulled his knife out and cut the center pieces out. Lady Liberty, Jeff Davis, magnolia tree, coiled rattlesnake with a hawk on there, and stuck in his coat, went to Camp Douglas in Chicago, survived that, was exchanged in September '62, and comes back and goes, "Hey boys, look what I got." Woo-hoo, that guy didn't pay for dinner for a month, and brought that back. But it's signed, I think it's on this side, right down here by Nicola Marshall. Marshall's one, or not Nicola Marshall, Jackson Belknap. Belknap is one of my all-time favorite flag makers. He and his wife both got into it. That's Jackson Guards, 3rd Arkansas. That's the Blackburn Guards of the 1st Arkansas, 3rd Arkansas, and then St. John's Braves of 4th. So you can see an interesting variety. I love this one. This one's in Kansas at the Topeka in the State Museum. That's the Pike Guards of the 2nd Arkansas State Troops. It's a beautiful drawing of a lady on there. And then you see the Marion Light Infantry, cotton bale and a cotton boil on that side. Stars will be on the reverse. And here's some more. First, the Parole Guards of the 5th Louisiana, 7th Virginia Cavalry, the Mountain Rangers, and that's a company of the 9th Texas Cavalry, who will spend a lot of time fighting in Tennessee, by the way. Great unit. The Lowry Rifles of Mississippi. This is the Claiborne Rangers that was captured by Minnesota troops at the Battle of Jackson, Mississippi in June of '63. It's in Minnesota. And then the Cleveland Guards of 12th North Carolina troops. That was captured at the Battle of Hanover Courthouse. Now, unique company flags. This is a really interesting drawing. It's the 1st South Carolina Volunteers. Company flag, company flag, company flag, company flag, company flag. So if all 10 companies had flags, that's what would be on display. Not all companies got flags, most of them would. And what they would do early in the war, if the regiment was not presented with a specific flag by the ladies, or somebody paid for it, they would vote on which company flag is what they're going to follow into battle. That's why some company colors will be captured in combat. So here's some unique ones. Claiborne Guards of the 2nd Alabama Infantry. That's down at your archives in Montgomery. I have a picture of another flag that looks like that, the Parole Guards, captured on the number 10. It's just chips of silk, and it looks like that now. So if you got a few extra bucks and the state's still conserving flags, kicking some money, because that's going to be about a $20,000 job. That's the Marion Light Artillery. That's made of dressed silk with designs in it. That's at the Museum of the Confederacy, and then that's the Pamlico Rifles of the 4th North Carolina State Troops. So you see a variety of company flags. The Cane Creek Rifles, I showed this at this project a couple weeks ago. It goes, Creed's Clearwater Revival? No, they weren't around then. Monticello Guards of South Carolina, there's another artist design, he's painted several of these, we don't know who he is. Magnolia Cadets of Alabama. Here's the Cherokee Artillery of Georgia, future, there's Max Van de Corbett, no, that's Max Van de Corbett, and that's future Confederate General Marcellus Stovall. He was the captain, and then there's the Fernandina Volunteers, made by a guy from Charleston named C.W. Stiles, that's in Florida in a private collection. And then the Guilford Grays, this is a North Carolina unit that was made by Horseman Brothers in Philadelphia, the noted military maker of America at the time. Here's the flag of the 7th Georgia, why the one they actually carried at First Manassas. And that was at the Alabama Archives, and they didn't know what they had until I found an article that described it. Excuse me, the Atlanta History Center had that. And didn't know what they had until I found it. I called the curators, a long-time friend of mine, and said, you owe me steak dinner, that's the first flag of the 7th Georgia Infantry, because he talked about it. This flag was captured at the Battle of Mill Springs. WD-25 had no idea what unit it was. We choose our own institutions, we collect our own revenue. That's why these guys are going to fight. Some more slogans, victory or death, very common, onward to victory. The 17th Texas, fearless and faithful. Patriotic slogans like our ancestors, we will be free, says the 5th South Carolina, and that is in Latin, dulce decorum est pro patria mori, it is sweet to die for one's country. That's the flag of the 21st Virginia Infantry that we lost at Gettysburg. And then if you go to Kennesaw Mountain, you'll see the flag of the Cherokee Dragoons of the Phillips Georgia Legion. And what do they have here? Either with it or upon it. What does that mean historically? Again, keep in mind, people back then knew more about history than we do today.
On your shield.
When the Spartan man graduates from the Agogé, his mother presents him the shield, his symbol of the Spartan army and his war cloak. And Sparta never had walls like Athens did. They said, our men with their shields are the only walls we need. And she hands the shield to her son and says, come home with it or upon it. They knew Greek and Roman history exceedingly well 160 years ago. Far better than we do today. One of my favorite company flags, 15th Virginia. Why did those guys go to war? Says it one word right there. Very powerful.
Right.
Defend this, the homes of your mothers, wives, and sisters, our homes and our rights. Georgia, our home. I know that's why my ancestor was a farmer in Western Virginia went to war, because there were Yankees coming across the Ohio River. That's why he did it. How many have ever heard of the Confederate Revenue Service? This is the second official Confederate flag. Everybody thinks there's only 3 or 4. The Congress adjourns because everybody's moving to Richmond, and they give the power to Davis to authorize anything needed. So the Confederate Revenue Service, which forms out of former members of the United States Revenue Service, that was their flag, creates a revenue. What does the Revenue Service do back then that they really don't do? Well, they kind of do it today. Tariffs. They would have revenue cutters at all the southern ports and the northern ones. So here comes a foreign ship, or even an American ship coming home from Europe, and they would sail out and meet it. May I see your cargo manifest? And they would inspect it, inspect the cargo, and then pull out the book of duty. And this is how much you owe us when you dock. There'll be an agent meeting you at the port. How did the United States government fund itself in 1861? Tariffs. We're going to cut taxes. Oh God, if it was going to cut taxes. They made one during the war, and they rescinded it. So there's the Confederate Revenue Service. If you read about the CSS Virginia coming down the James River to Hampton Roads, escorted by 2 gunboats, the newspaper accounts will say one of them is flying a French flag. That was a revenue cutter. Because it does look like the flag of France. There are 3 of these that still exist. This one, 2 others, and then the drawing. What's the Revenue Service of the United States called today? The United States Coast Guard. Flag harkens back to that, by the way. Some naval flags. CSS Alabama, that's a boat flag. Excuse me, that's the boat flag of CSS Alabama. We have tracked 14 flags, 14 is a whole of 4 fingers. 14 flags to the CSS Alabama that still exist. More flags from that ship than any other Confederate warship. That's the CSS Arkansas, and then that's a drawing of the first naval jack. Tradition is, and we copied the Royal Navy on this, that when you have a jack, it flies from the bow flagstaff of the ship only when it's in port. This is never used in battle. So when a Confederate warship would be in port, all other flags come down, that flag comes up. is based on a rectangular version of the canton of the First National. When they adopt the Second National flag, the jack changes to the canton of the Second National flag. The United States follows that tradition today with 50 stars and a blue one. Now, in September '61, Miles is now on the staff of Beauregard, and he's up there in Virginia. There he is with Joe Johnston with what was then called the Army of the Potomac. There's Miles, and here is Colonel William Cabell, later a Confederate general of Pikes and Trans, Mississippi. And out in front of the Fairfax County Courthouse is that marker. So these guys are meeting to discuss creating, quote, a war flag. Miles is not a fan of the First National. So he says, hey, I got this flag I designed that the committee rejected, and now we've got 12 states out. I think it'll look a little bit better. And Beauregard and Johnson go, yeah, that looks pretty cool, but let's make it square because it's easy to make. Military flags back then were square and had been for a couple hundred years prior to that. Right angles. Much quicker and easier to make than rectangular flags. So they vote on it. They like Miles' flag. Miles is the father of the first Confederate official battle flag. They will task William Cabell to go around to the dry goods dealers of Richmond with a subordinate officer, Captain Coleman McRae, to buy up bulk silk to make the first 120 of these flags. The other submission that came in was Edward Hancock from Louisiana. Here's a nice drawing, here's what it should be like. The thing I like about Hancock is he talks in his letter, which I didn't add to this, that we put the coat of arms of each state in the upper corner, which I would have loved, because then if it was an unknown flag, okay, they're from South Carolina, they're from Alabama, they're from Georgia, at least we know where they were. Here's Miles' letter in August 27, '61 to Beauregard, talking about his design of the flag and the colors and things like that. He's got 15 stars on that guy. When Hancock's design comes in, Miles goes, wait a minute, I've been down that road before with the Jews of Charleston and fundamentalist Christians. I think we should go with this saltire pattern flag. And the other two guys go, okay, if you say so. And they vote on it. So once it's decided upon, they will task the three Carey ladies, Constance of Richmond and Hetty and Jenny Carey of Baltimore, who were their cousins, and to make the first three pattern battle flags. I had a friend of mine who's now deceased, World War II veteran, 45th Infantry Division, that had the major hots for Constance Carey. I said, oh yeah, she's a babe, no doubt about it. She marries a prominent Confederate staff officer and writes a book about her time. So here's your prototypes. These are smaller flags, and they talk about, Constance in her book talks about, we had a dickens of a time finding red silk, because red silk back then was in small bolts. Bolts were typically 18 inches wide. Red is not a proper color for women back then. It's a trim color, however. So you can have a blue dress or a pink dress or whatever, and you would highlight the cuffs and the collar with a little bit of red, but you do not go all red. That's Victorian era stuff. Nope, ladies of the night type stuff. We don't do that. So they talk about having a dickens of time finding red. So you can kind of see slightly pinkish. So we have, there's Joe Johnston's flag, there's Van Dorn's flag, and that's Beauregard's flag. And they'll be given these flags in the fall of 1861, and then Johnston and Beauregard order the flags made. Here's invoices from South running around Richmond buying up silk. 8 yards yellow silk, 15 yards yellow silk, pieces of ribbon, 2 yards of rich pink silk, keep that color in mind, pink silk, and then signed Colin McRae self right here, and Army contingencies. He buys up the dress silk supply of Richmond. There goes another myth. A lot of people think that the women are donating their dresses for this. Happens sometimes. This is a bulk purchase of silk to make the flags. So here's Beauregard's letter dated November 26th, 2 days before the presentation. Thomas George is Adjutant General. A new banner entrusted to you today is the battle flag of the Army of the Potomac. It becomes the Army of Virginia when Lee takes command in June of '62. It can never be surrendered, on and on and on. This is your exhortation to make it happen. So starting on November 28th and ending in December, depending on the weather, Johnston and Beauregard, there's Beauregard still in blue, Johnston and Confederate, there's Old Pete Longstreet. The regiments would form up at a semicircle with the colonel, the majors and stuff in the center, and they would come up with the flags, and all three types of the silk flags are evident there. And then the colonel would come forward and hand the flag, and Beauregard would say, do you promise not to let this flag trail in dust or surrender it? Yes, General, I do. Bands are playing and stuff. The colonel of 20th Georgia gets his flag and goes, pink! And Beauregard says, dye it red with your blood, sir. You pipsqueak little colonel. He took umbrage to that, not knowing, you see, all these flags are pink. Because that's what they bought. Here's some examples of these early, and all three issues. Blue hoist, yellow, white silk stars, painted stars with fringe around it. So there were three patterns, and there's all three of them right there. This one was captured at Williamsburg in May of 1862. There's some more. 15th Alabama. This is not the flag that goes up and down Little Round Top. That flag is buried with the color bearer in Fall, Alabama. This is the previous flag to that flag. 11 Mississippi, they lost that at Antietam for North Carolina State troops, lost that at Chancellorsville. Despite the adoption of this distinctive flag, a lot of units are like, we're still going to keep flying flags that we happen to like. 36 Virginia flies this flag until September 1864 when they lose at the Battle of Fort Winchester. And then the 7th Tennessee, who had lost their Army of Virginia flag, loses this flag at Petersburg, 1865. And the 16th Georgia loses that flag on South Mountain. Part of the reason is it takes time for the depot system to ramp up, buy up the bulk cloth, and get flags made and issued. That's part of the reason why. And then all the wool bunting, they don't use silk anymore because it's not durable. This flag is made of imported merino. But the wool bunting is a durable material and it's only made in England. American bunting comes online in 1866. It's never as good as the British. The British standard was bunting. All the U.S. Navy flags, Army big flags, bunting. Imported English bunting. So if the blockade has cut it off for a while, then sometimes the depot can't make it. This is one of John Hunt Morgan's flags captured in Cynthiana, Kentucky in 1864. 31st Alabama flag captured at Champion Hill. They didn't care if the Jews or the fundamentalist Christians griped about a Latin cross. They put it on their flag, by golly. Reynolds Brigade captured at Missionary Ridge, November 63. Sumter Artillery captured in the Appomattox campaign. It was the 27th Georgia Atlanta campaign. And the 3rd Georgia Cavalry lost that flag. That's one of their company colors at the Battle of Stones River or Murfreesboro to the 3rd Indiana Cavalry, who had captured their earlier battle flag 2 months earlier in Kentucky. Same regiments fighting off, and 3rd Georgia loses both their flags. This one, Georgia coat of arms flag, that's the oldest one we know of, other than the one that's in Mexico. That was bravely liberated from a house on Sherman's March to the Sea. No doubt the Yankee soldier went in that bedroom, opened the trunk, and wrestled that trunk to the floor, fighting all the way, goes, takes the flag, and portraits at the Georgia Capitol Museum. This is embroidered. It's a beautiful flag. The Wilson Invincibles, that was left in a store in Nashville and found by the Union in 1863. I think they're from Wilson County. We have no idea who they are. And around here it said Independence. That's all gone away because we have the description. And that was captured in Rome, Georgia in 1864. So you can still see First National flags. They're not going away. Now, there we go. Whoops, wrong direction. I'll get this high-tech stuff. There we go. So before the depot system ramps up, and by the way, the depot system works for both sides at the same time. Women would sew flags using dresses or bulk dress material. If they wanted a patriotic slogan or certain design on the flag, women didn't have the painting skills. If they could embroider, they would do it. Let's say Athens might not have been big enough to have a guy who was a sign painter. What was the population here? You have any idea?
700 here.
Probably wasn't it. They might have gone to Huntsville. So say there's a guy that does sign painting. So you're a businessman, you want a nice pretty sign in front of your business, right? So you go hire a sign painter. What's your name, sir?
Jimmy.
Jimmy? Okay, Jimmy's Hardware. So you're gonna pay a guy, sign painter, Jimmy's Hardware, he's gonna make it real fancy, laminated wood, and you'll hang it in front of your store. Those guys start painting flags. So the ladies make up a flag, this is gonna be pretty, go to Huntsville and say, the sign painter, this is what we want on the flag, and he says, okay, give me $50. So they raise the money and pay him for the flag, and then they present it. If they didn't have the time or the skills, they would just hire a flag guy to make it. Some units would pay for the flags themselves, and then as more and more units are raised, they would contract with smaller flag makers like Jackson Belknap down in Mobile, made a bunch of flags. He made political banners, that was his trade, and signs. This is one paid by subscription. These are the ladies that pass the hat, there's how much money they all donated, to make the flag of the Powhatan, I'm probably mispronouncing that. Give it to me, Lee, come on.
I don't know that one.
Yeah, this one, okay. Powhatan Troop of the 4th Virginia Cavalry. That's Pocahontas. and then the coat of arms of Virginia on the other side. Beautiful flag, I've seen it in person, it's drop dead gorgeous flag. So Confederate soldiers go to war with a whole mess of different colors. I'm sure the Yankees are like, who are these guys? Because of, you know, looking at all the different flags. There's the 8th Arkansas, that was captured in the Atlantic Campaign, 5th, 9th Kentucky. This is the canton of the Delhi Rangers of the 15th Georgia. The Stars and Stripes part had been cut away. That's in a private collection I got to see about 25 years ago. All of these flags meant something to the men that bore them because they were recruited from here in Athens or down the road in Huntsville or over in Moulton, and they went off to war together. Sons, brothers, cousins, dads, uncles. When those guys went to war, you're fighting for your town, your in-laws that are in that unit, everything. So that flag is that symbol. Really, really meant something to these people back in these days. 1st Alabama Infantry, they lost that at Island number 10. It was out in Nebraska for a while, now it's in Montgomery. Kentucky State Guard was the pro-Confederate state militia of Kentucky that formed in 1860, and that's their flag, the Woodford Blues. Keep that in mind. That's, I think, the impetus for the Hardy pattern battle flag. And then this is the North Carolina Grays. All of these, I think, deserve respect as a battle flag, and many of these will fly in battle. If you go out to Utah, you can see the flag of the Ought-to-Be Plowboys. It's in a museum out there in Utah. That was a Go West Young Man thing. Conecuh Guards, the 4th Alabama, I love that flag. And then this is the reverse side of the Cherokee Brown Riflemen of the 2nd Georgia Infantry. The outer side's the 1st National. I got a little rattlesnake there. They're into little rattlesnakes back now. I'm not. Salute of Sentinels, militia flag of South Carolina. There's George E. Washington on there. Ketchum Artillery of Alabama. You see how I went heavy on Alabama? I didn't do that consciously. I just liked Alabama's flag. Petersburg Guard, and that's the 8th Virginia Infantry's flag. That's in Maryland in a collection there. Conserving flags. I've seen them much worse than this, like the Parade Guards of Alabama. It was a pile. In fact, they used to have in their flag room a photo mosaic of here's the flag as we got it, pile of silk chips. Here's the conservator starting to put it together like a jigsaw puzzle. Here she is putting it in stable text. Here she is doing this, and then you turn around and there it was. They can fix these things. They can save them. They can conserve them, and it's a good thing they can because they don't make these anymore. They're rare. They're expensive. They're valuable, and it's our history. So if you got $5 or $10, kick it down to Alabama Archives. Here's another example. George's Bartow Artillery. That was a real mess. There it is. So they can do wonders with flag conservation. This one is another one turned up about 3 years ago. Lady donates it to the Atlanta History Center, the Panola Guards of Mississippi. And it was carried in a UCB parade in Gallatin, Tennessee, just north of Nashville. It was said the newspaper article says the only flag displayed that day. I like it, prompt and true. There's my credits page. Thank you very much for having me. Coming soon. It's actually, that program's done, the year of the battle flags. I've divided it into Eastern and Western theater just because I had to. So you can see a myriad of flags, and there's more that the Confederate Army, particularly out here in the West, will use. The Army of Northern Virginia will start to standardize their flags early on. The Army of Tennessee doesn't do it until 1864. So they will fight under a whole mess of different flags. That's one of my favorites, the Van Dorn pattern of, that's one of the Missouri regiments. Again, the crescent from Missouri coat of arms. So I hope I've taught you a little bit of something. If you have any questions, if you want to throw Greg in the rivers or a river nearby, you can throw me into. Yes, sir.
You mentioned something about the Confederates acquiring a Union flag from a railroad car. I'm interested about that.
The other way around. The Union
Yankees.
acquired a Confederate flag from a railroad car.
Yankees got our flags.
Yeah, you got flipped around. Yeah, it was one of Wilson's guys after they'd gone through Alabama, took out Columbus, Georgia. They're riding towards Macon, and they found there was a train there, went through the boxcars, and that's where that Arkansas flag came out of.
By any,
God lived there.
by any chance, do you know what railroad company that those boxcars were
Ooh,
owned by?
that's a great question. Who was running in Macon? It might have been the Macon and Western.
Union Pacific, most likely.
No, they didn't exist then.
But that's where the Union Pacific originally originated from.
Macon, Georgia?
Don't be going nowhere.
You're really making
You wanna go?
Macon, Georgia?
You might
You may wanna check on that one. Union Pacific, those guys way out there in the west, like at Promontory Point, Utah.
Promontory Park.
Yes, with the golden spike.
Yeah, do
They're
research.
called the Union Pacific because they were heading into the Pacific.
Okay, right.
That's why they were the transcontinental, first transcontinental railroad. There was a northern and a southern route. And that was argued before the war. Obviously, the Southerners said, no, we need to run through like Mississippi and Texas, and which would have been smarter. Why? No mountains.
Yeah.
Read about the building of that railroad. The company coming out of California had a dickens of a time punching through those mountains.
Yeah.
Whereas the guys coming through Kansas and Oklahoma, or wherever
They
they're
just
going, they're like,
went-
well, all I gotta deal with is the Sioux and the Arapaho, but other than that, no mountains until,
Cross the ditch every now and then.
Yep.
The Southern Railway was a part of.
Hold on,
Hi, how can I help you?
because we have a meeting to get to.
Yeah.
I'll catch you later, I'll give you his email address, how about that?
These,
I've got a question. In the early 1900s, it became popular to return flags to states. Is that, I mean,
1905.
how many, I mean, like half of them or a third of them or?
Thank you for bringing this up, because it is a two-pronged question. There are still northern state collections that hold Confederate flags. Ohio has 3, Minnesota has 10 or 12, Wisconsin has a few. Did I say Minnesota yet? Minnesota's got, okay. I'm trying to think, New York's got a handful, New Jersey's got a handful. Iowa's got a handful, because I've seen the Iowa collection. By the way, they have the 45th Alabama's already pattern flag there too. And when Bob, did y'all know Bob Bradley? He was a curator down in Alabama Archive. I just talked to him on the phone the other day. He was telling me, and I said, hey Bob, I just got back from Des Moines, saw the 45th Alabama flag and the other Confederate flags he got there. He said, man, I know these guys in the Alabama SCB, they want to get together, this army of guys, and go storm the gates of the Rio and get that flag back. I said, Bob, tell the Alabama SCB boys that if they've never been to Des Moines, there's no gates. You just drive right in on the freeway or whatever. There's no gates in Des Moines. And I said, also tell them this: they take care of their Confederate flags captured as well as they take care of their own Iowa colors. State-of-the-art conservation drawers, humidity, climate controlled. You want to go see them? Go see it. They'll pull it. You make an appointment. They'll pull out. Here's your 45th Alabama. They've got that 31st Alabama flag too, captured Champion Hill. They'll pull them out and show them to you. They're a public museum. That's what they're there for.
Yeah,
Having
they
said
don't
that,
put down either, though.
so you have states that have collections. In fact, Rosecrans captures 18 Confederate flags at the Battle of Corinth in October '62. None go to the War Department. Iowa has four papers, 4 of them, 2 Van Dorns and 2 other ones. So those that are sent to states, like what Minnesota gets and Wisconsin, Illinois got a handful still, those are state property. Even though it said the War Department, all captured material should be sent to the War Department. The farther west you got from Washington City, as it was called then, the least likely it's going to happen. You read Grant's report for Vicksburg, 85 flags. Ask me how many made it to the War Department. Goose egg. 2 of them showed up at the Cincinnati Sanitary Fair, courtesy of General Frank Blair. Loaned them to the fair, took them back home. So the Blairs were, Montgomery Blair, Postmaster General, Frank Blair, the Confederate or Union General. The Blair family, if they're still in St. Louis, probably still has those flags. Texas and Louisiana color. So the states are not covered by the 1905 federal return initiated by Theodore Roosevelt, President of the United States. It starts in 1887. Grover Cleveland's president, a submission from Richard Coulter Drum, Adjutant General of the Union Army, says maybe it's time to return the flags. So in the South you have what? The Veterans Organizations, United Confederate Veterans, the northern counterparts of Grand Army of the Republic. And you have UCD chapters all over the place, you have GAR chapters all over the place. Some still exist and still have very nice collections. The GAR went apoplectic. The commander of the Ohio GAR said, quote, may palsy strike the brain that thought this, may palsy strike the hand that wrote this, and may palsy strike the mouth that speaks this. In other words, hell no, we're not sending these flags back. What does it take? The Spanish-American War. And at some point I want to do a program on the Spanish-American War as the real healer between North and South. Because William McKinley, Union Sergeant in the 23rd Ohio Infantry, hires Joe Wheeler, Tom Rosser, Fitz Lee, and a handful of other Confederate commanders, because he says, we're going to war against a common enemy, and I need to move a lot of guys with blue suits to Tampa to go to Cuba. I need the South on board. McKinley gets it. That's why he gets Wheeler and these guys back in. He gets it. So I have to move these guys. Have you seen the movie The Rough Riders? There's like a 3-part miniseries. Sam, what's his name, is in it. It's a great movie. You'll get it. Turner did it. Turner Broadcasting did it. And here's a trainload of Union or of U.S. Army troops in blue on their way to Tampa, Florida. And here's a grizzled Confederate veteran in his gray suit with his granddaughter. And she goes, "Grandpappy, them's Yankees." She goes, "No, they're Americans."
No, they Yankees.
They could have been from Georgia. They wore blue suits, the Georgia troops. Go look at the pictures of them and check them on the battlefield. They're wearing blue suits. That's the reconciliation point. McKinley was smart enough to realize that we're going to have a common enemy. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. Let's get Confederates back in command structure. And he gets Union generals too, like Wesley Merritt, guys like that. And they fight and they win. And now the country's unified. And now in 1905, when Roosevelt is president, and he says, now's the time. So whatever was in the War Department, 500 and change of flags, went back to the states where they could be identified, and those that they couldn't go to what becomes the Museum of the Confederacy. That's how they get their collection. Now more keep coming out and things like that. And some states have sent them back. Michigan did in 1942. Figuring like, well, the South was part of the United States, we're gonna go fight the Japanese and the Germans, let's send their flags back. So they did. They sent 8, 9 flags that they had back. Indiana sent some back. Ohio has sent some back. So there's been returns. I'm trying to get a Mississippi flag out of Ohio back to Mississippi.
And opposite, I'm assuming, from the south to the north.
Well, here's what happens. So northern flags go to Richmond and are displayed there. What happens in Richmond after April 2nd, 1865, when Lee's lines get shattered? Fire, burns up, lots of flags get destroyed, lots of paper. You can read accounts of Union soldiers marching into Richmond and piles of papers, documents from government agencies that are all missing history, burning, blowing around, picking them up, shoving them in the knapsack, take them home, get them, I don't know what this crap is, let's throw it away. Tons of pages of history, and that's where those flags went, because the War Department building burned. So, and Chicago Historical Society, because of the Great Chicago Fire of 1871, all the Chicago regiments had turned in their colors, all gone, and one Confederate flag captured at the Battle of Franklin, one of the Missouri regiments, burned up in the Great Chicago Fire. So that happens, but thank you for bringing that up. I hope that answers and to y'all's satisfaction. So the Spanish-American War is very important for healing the North and South. Very, very important. I don't think people understand that. Anybody else? Because y'all got stuff to do, and I have to get on down the road to Hartsville, Alabama. Thank you all. Always love coming back.